Zoom secretary telling us that this meeting is being recorded. So if you have to leave early, you're coming in late, you will get a recording of this when it's done. But actually, just so from my yard, I picked up, this is some rye on the right-hand side. This is a variety called Renza Bruzzi. And here on my right is this is a Sonora wheat. So anyways, I just wanted to pull these out while I was talking so you could get a visual comparison. Rye is quite different than wheat in one primary way. It doesn't have the same proteins inside the endosperm of the seed that wheat does. It does have protein, but it doesn't have the gliadin and the glutamine inside of the wheat berry that are necessary to create gluten. When you add water to flour made from rye berries, essentially what you're hydrating in that mixture is something called a pentazine, and that's a complex sugar. So rather than hydrating proteins and making long chains that then create a webby network in your dough, you're essentially hydrating sugars. The sugars swell, they can take on 100 times their weight in water, and so rye flour is very fragile, very delicate, and can be difficult to rise. So what I love about these brownies is that you get to work with rye flour and get comfortable with it in a pastry application. I'm calling brownies a pastry, yes. And you get to explore the flavor of it before you have to worry about fermenting it. And so what I love most about rye is it has such a complex range of flavors, and in my opinion, more so than wheat. You know, wheat, I generally get like a sweet, nutty, weedy, grassy vibe. But rye goes, it has a herbaceous, vegetal, floral, cinnamon, nutmeg. It can be spicy and hot, peppery, and it can also be really mellow and almost like I have a friend who describes it as black tea or green tea. So, you know, sometimes with wheat, we talk about white wheat berries or red wheat berries in terms of white or red wine. But with rye, you can think about it as more of a tea, like a dark, earthy, tannic tea, or something lighter like a green tea, brighter, maybe even a little bit lemony. So it's just so beautiful to look at as well. We think, the story goes, that as we were selecting for grains to cultivate, you know, we generally chose wheat to grow, but rye was on the edges of these fields, and every year as we collected the grain from the fields through the harvest, some of that rye seed spilled into the wheat, and as we migrated north into, you know, Eastern European countries, colder climates, rye grows really well in adverse conditions. So some of you might know, like I gave my daughter, her middle name is Rye, because I wanted her to have that quality to her personality. Of course, she's gonna like already be who she is, but growing well in adverse conditions is something that rye as a crop is definitely known for. So it's just unique, it's versatile, and I think at this time when we're looking for changes in our social structures, changes in regenerative agriculture, turning towards things like rye, not necessarily, you know, shunning wheat or eschewing it altogether, but just adding more tools to our toolkit. Maybe you're going to make these brownies, you're going to be intrigued by rye flour, and then we can start talking more about fermenting it. Rye flour does ferment quicker and a little bit differently than wheat flour. And so for this brownie recipe, you don't have to add it, but there is in the ingredients rye starter. So I'm going to show you mine here. Try and get a little close. So I keep 3 different kinds of starter. I have a white flour starter with white bread flour. This is my rye starter, and I have a whole wheat starter. And so you'll see probably the first thing you might notice is that it's not covered in what we call like dish soap size bubbles on the top. So again, this is very fragile flour, doesn't have the proteins needed to create gluten, but it smells delicious. It smells fragrant. It has a earthy soil kind of feel to it. and a little bit like of a mushroom, herby flavor as well. And so I feed my rye starter. In the summer, everything, whether it's my whole wheat, my white flour, my rye flour, this is all going to ferment very quickly. So I like to feed my starters a heartier breakfast, if you will, in the summer. So I am currently, if you're interested, feeding this rye meal from Carolina Ground. So rye meal is just a coarser, less of a flour, more of a cracked grain, and it tends to ferment better with a heartier rye meal feeding in the summer. And just this gorgeous color to it as well. So if you need to start a rye starter from scratch, we do have dehydrated rye starter on my website. You can grab that. You just add it in a container with some flour and water, mix it together, you're good to go. But out of all the starters to start, I do think rye is the easiest. It ferments quickly, and you can have an active, ready starter that can make bread in about a week, whereas the wheat flour, you have to do a little bit more training for the wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria to create an equilibrium inside of the white flour. So that takes, in my opinion, about 2 to 3 weeks to get going. So if you're actually looking for something fast and easy, I can't recommend starting a rye starter enough. It's been my favorite thing that I discovered while writing my last book was actually how easy it is to work with rye. The main thing is just getting your mind out of the timetables and fermentation cycles for wheat. And then once you go to make rye bread, many rye breads are made in stages because we want to have high levels of acidification. One of the other differences, going off a little tangent here, but one of the other differences between wheat and rye is that although wheat flour has those necessary proteins to create gluten, rye flour has something called amylase. They both do, but rye flour has a fair bit of it, and it's an enzyme. And that enzyme is going to want to go into, or the enzyme is present in the flour. When the water is added, it's activated, and it will start to break apart the rye dough. So rye doughs for bread need to be fermented a little bit differently. So you just have a different bread temperature and a different timetable when you're using rye, but there's no folding, there's very little shaping, it bakes for a long time, generally in a loaf pan. As a new mom, it's like totally saved me, and I'm able to have rye bread like every week at my house, so easy, and I've actually stopped making a lot of those lofty white sourdough breads at home because I don't have time to do all the folding. So just a little brief portrait into the world of rye bread to just encourage you to step further into that territory if you haven't already. And I know some of you have, because I see so many great faces and names, and good morning. Does anybody have any basic questions about rye flour before we get going into more of the brownie territory? You can type them into the chat, and then Shane will ask them out loud if we have any. I'll just give folks a sec. Anything there? Okay, cool. So for the brownies, couple tools that you will want. The instructions that you got recommended, I think a 9x9 or 8x8 cake, little square pan, and you're gonna make a parchment sling. I forgot mine at my house this morning, so we're making them in a skillet. And these are the brownies that we're making today. So this is 100% rye flour in here, super fudgy, gorgeous glossy paper top, so excited. And so this is the same thing. This is the bottom of my large combo cooker, and I just have buttered it and then floured it, shake out the excess flour, and you're good to go. Of course, you can follow the directions that I gave you and make a parchment sling for the bottom of your square pan. This feels very summer southern, so we're just going with it. So you want something, of course, to pour your brownies into. Here we're using the skillet.
Can't recommend enough. If you've taken one of my workshops before, virtually or in person, you know that I don't love an oven mitt, but I do love a welding glove. So these are pretty inexpensive. I think they're about $12. The nice brand to get is Hobart. And these are just so helpful. As you can see, they cover a large part of the arm so you can handle hot, heavy stuff and you're good to go. So if you don't have a pair of these, totally recommend it for any kind of baking. I am going to use a mixer. You could do this with a spoon and a wooden bowl, of course, but we are going to use a mixer, and I'm just going to use my paddle attachment today. No whisk, don't have it. Biggest thing that you'll want if you don't already have it is a digital scale. So I'm so excited to turn people on to baking with a digital scale when it comes to stuff like brownies and cakes and pies, because a lot of that is talked about in cups and tables and teaspoons, which is part of this, so you don't have to use a micro scale. But using a scale is going to help your baking be consistent every time you go to make your brownies, so you take some of the guesswork out. You can also weigh out the ingredients directly into the bowl, so it's a lot less cleanup, which who doesn't love like less dishes, right? So digital scale, if you don't have one, that brand is called a My Way. I think they're around $35. And a lot of the stuff that I use here in the studio, you can find on the website webstaurant.com. It's great, and I'm just giving them a shout out. Nobody's paying me to say this, but you can get commercial bakery equipment just delivered to your home, which isn't possible with all suppliers. So that's where I get my parchment paper and all that kind of stuff from. Again, it's webstaurant.com. We'll focus on, oh, and you want to make yourself a double boiler. So for us, Shane, if you want to just show over here, we have just a pot. It's mostly filled with water, and then a bowl on top to melt our butter and chocolate. So not a lot of fancy equipment, and it's fine. It's brownies. Ingredients, though, I will do a little note on butter. So this is the Plugra and the Kerrygold are what I can find at my local grocery store. And if you can find Vermont Creamery butter that has the highest butterfat content, so whether I'm making a brownie, a cookie, a cake, pie dough, I want something that is European style. Here in the United States, by law, butter has to have 80% butterfat to it. If in Europe, it's 82%. So if you can find European styled butter, that just means it's going to have 2% more butter fat than say an American butter. And you might think that that's not a lot, but it is, and it definitely reflects in your baking, both in terms of like the shininess and the texture that you're going to get, and also that flavor. And I mentioned the Vermont Creamery butter. I know, you know, I'm here in the coal fields, far eastern Kentucky, and I know I can occasionally find it here. So I think it's doing a big push, but that has 86% butterfat. So if you can find that where you live, or maybe order it online, it is a wonderful company in Vermont. And that is what I know of to be the highest butterfat butter that you can just get commercially at a grocery store. So I actually prefer to use the Kerrygold. This tends to soften more and has that grass-fed color to it. I prefer to use this for my frostings or my icing. And I actually like to use the Plugra for, let's say, inside the brownie batter, or say in my cookies. It's a little firmer and doesn't have the same kind of plasticity that the Kerrygold does. So that's just personal preference. So the Kerrygold is going into the tahini buttercream, and the Plugra is what's going to be melted and go into the brownies. So that's that on the butter. Big summer of butter. So I'll just go through the other ingredients here. For the brownie, I'm using this like very adorable small bag of flour here, but many of you know I lived at a wood-fired bakery outside of Asheville, North Carolina for many years, and maybe we have even hung out there. But this is rye flour from Carolina Ground, and they are in Asheville, North Carolina. The owner and miller, Jennifer Lapidus, just wrote a book that is out now called Southern Ground, which is great. I don't feel like the Southeast gets represented a lot in terms of conversation on grain. Rye actually grows very well here, as do soft pastry wheats, and so you can order this online, and you can also order rye berries from them. So if you are interested in making your own rye flour, something like this, I have a small tabletop mill. This is called a Colmo. And I know that they became quite popular during the pandemic. And you can mill your own flour right at home. So we're not going to get too much into that, but you can get whole rye berries and a selection of rye flours from Carolina Ground in Asheville, North Carolina. So that is where our flour is coming from today. And just take a peek at it. You can see, you're gonna notice in the rye flour, the color is a little bit different. It's got like a gray feel to it, and then big flecks of bran in there as well. So this is whole rye flour. Rye flour you can get in many different stages of grind. So you can get, just one sec. Hey, Terrence. Our friend Terrence is here. I just started watching like the very first episodes of Sesame Street, so it's feeling very Sesame Street in here right now with all the opening, closing doors and our guests and you. So you'll notice with the rye flour, it's incredibly fluffy. So there's tons of starch inside of the rye berry. And so when the rye berry gets milled, it's voluminous, and it's so fun to stir up the flour before you mix up your brownies. Always aerate the flour. I don't care if it's pizza dough, bread dough, cookie, cake. You really want to aerate your flour before you start adding stuff to it. So just a side tip. But Renzabruzzi rye, another great kind of rye that you can find is Danko, and that grows more in, say, New England. You can get that from Maine Grains, and then you can kind of compare between the Renzabruzzi, which has that peppery overtone to it, and the Danko, which has a more mellow kind of green tea flavor. You can try those two varieties maybe in the brownies and see if you notice a flavor difference. Of course, the chocolate's going to be quite strong here, so you could also do something like a cracker and taste side by side. And everything else is pretty much straightforward. We've got 3 eggs, we've got sugar, I like to use unbleached, vanilla, oil, veggie oil, and I always show the salt. I only use pink Himalayan sea salt. I like it for my bread dough because I can see if I've added it or not. And it does have a little bit more minerality to it, just a tiny bit more flavor. If you are nuts for salt, you could put large chunks of flaky Maldon salt on the top of these, you know, if it's not already like rich enough for you. And so you can have big, large chunks of salt for that. And we've already got the dry ingredients ready, mixed up. So there's sort of 3 moving parts to this brownie. You want to have everything out and ready. So much of baking is just assembly. And if you can do what we call the weigh out all your ingredients, read through the recipe once, whatever it is that you're about to make, get yourself comfortable. And then when you're doing it, you're not forgetting something, grabbing something, all that kind of stuff. And you can just enjoy the grounding process of baking. That's what I love so much about it. It just is a buoy for me in this ocean of life. So for the frosting, we'll go over that real quick. Just powdered sugar. We've got organic white powdered sugar. No big deal. Tahini, folks have maybe favorite brands. I like, this said creamy, ready, and squeezable on it. So I was like, okay, I'm ready for that. So this is what I have, and it truly is very smooth. If you get like a traditional kind of tahini, you're gonna wanna make sure to have it like mixed up with all the oil in the sesame base before you get going, so you don't get caught doing that later on. And again, we've got this gorgeous Kerrygold butter and some vanilla for the topping, for the icing. Okay. And let's get to it. So you want to have your flour weighed out, everything ready to go. And into the flour is also going to go the cocoa powder. And you want to have a double boiler going, the oven on, and everything ready to start mixing. So the first thing that we're going to do is blend together the eggs and the sugar. And we're going to get this really glossy. So we're going to blend the eggs and the sugar together till it's a pale yellow, bubbly, almost like a marshmallow consistency. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of boiling water to that. That's going to help melt the sugar to make that gloss. And then we'll continue to add to that. We have over here melted butter, the required amounts of melted butter and chocolate. And it says in the recipe to use bittersweet chocolate. You can, but I wanted to tell you today that one of the secrets to getting that super glossy paper thin top is having a little bit of milk chocolate in your brownies. I'm not a huge milk chocolate person, so I was surprised to learn this, but we could call my mom right now and ask her. I have cried over this brownie recipe by the oven many times, and I just couldn't figure out how that glossy top is happening. So the addition of something like a milk chocolate chip to the melted butter, it's just that extra bit of fat that helps make that gloss on the top. The milk chocolate has it, and then, you know, I was using just very dark, intense, like 100% cacao. That's the flavor profile I like. And so, of course, you know, you can eschew tradition, but it's nice to know how to achieve some aesthetic that you're looking for. So I really wanted that glossy top. So the milk chocolate chips is what's going to take you there. So you can use the bittersweet chocolate that's called for in the recipe. You can use a little bit of milk chocolate chips to supplement that. Or just go whole milk chocolate chips on there. So that is already ready and waiting for us. And then the last thing we're gonna do is add in the dry ingredients, the rye flour, the cocoa, and also the vanilla and the oil and the starter. So the starter goes in last. And if you're curious about adding starter to something, the best thing to do would be get your recipe in 2 grams. So however you need to do that, maybe you have a scale, a bowl, you make your standard recipe, you weigh everything out, get a look at how much flour is in your recipe, and then add 10% of that flour weight as the starter. So as I was working on my book and going through like, okay, I want to toss starter in stuff, what's a good amount to start with? That's how I figured it out. So if you've got a cake or something else, pie dough that you want to toss some extra sourdough starter into, that's totally fine and fun. And we all know that sourdough comes with a little bit of discard, and that can be a struggle to figure out what to do with it. It really can go into so many things just as a source of flavor and not necessarily leavening. So if you were just curious about how I figured out the amount of starter to add to this recipe, I wanted it to affect the consistency, like have it make it a little chewy. And then I always want to have just a tiny bit of the flavor profile coming through. And so this starter smells fresh, kind of grassy, kind of like a barn, to be honest, which is one of my favorite smells. But if you go to make your brownies and your rye starter, you could use your a whole wheat or a white flour starter in this as well. It wouldn't be 100% rye brownie, but you get the idea. If you go to smell it, it smells like nail polish remover. It's probably over fermented. Maybe it smells a little alcoholic. There's a layer on the top. Go ahead, discard the majority of it, feed it again. It should be ready to go into your brownies in just a few hours after that. But it should smell pleasant and, you know, edible. Okay. Do we have any questions so far? Otherwise, we're going to get to mixing.
What is the difference between whole rye and light rye, etc.? P.S. Love your new space.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, so the difference is same with, like, let's say we're going to get whole wheat flour. We can anticipate that's going to be all parts of the wheat berry. So quick refresher, 3 parts to most cereal grains, whether we're talking about like wheat berry or oats. You're going to have the embryonic germ, right? that's going to go on to grow the seed. You're going to have the endosperm, which surrounds the germ. Think about it like an egg. You've got that yolky middle, the white, and then the shell. Same with the wheat berry or the rye berry. So the difference is with rye, that shell, that fibrous outer coating actually is pervasive into the endosperm. So rye has a lot more fiber to it, has a lot more starch and sugars and less protein. It still has that embryonic heart and the outer shell. So let's say, for example, we're talking about whole wheat. You know, you can get whole wheat flour all the way down to white flour. And generally that process is just stripping away portions of the bran, removing the germ so the flour doesn't spoil, and then you've got white flour at the end. Same thing with rye, but the words are a little bit different. So you've got whole rye, which is going to be all parts of the rye berry, the germ, the endosperm, the bran on the outside, and then all the way down to light rye. So if it's coming from a stone ground mill, it will have the germ still present in the flour. So it is perishable. You want to keep it in the freezer. If it's coming from, say, just a commercial roller mill, you know, that's fine. It isn't going to have the germ, doesn't need to stay in refrigeration or in the freezer. That's essentially the difference. So that's where you get dark rye is also 100% rye. You get medium rye, which would be sort of in between a whole grain and a just the starchy middle light rye. That would be a medium rye. And then light rye is all the way on the other side over here. Super silky, super fine, the lightest in color. Then you get rye chops, rye meal, and a lot of byproducts from the rye process that are, if you foray into, say, like pumpernickel or other kinds of dense rye breads, they're often soaked and added into the dough. So it can be a little intimidating to shop around for rye flours because the language is a little bit different, but it's essentially the same thing. You've got whole grain all the way to sifted, and you've got all the bran, all the germ, all the endosperm, all the way to just a little bit of that super silky, starchy middle. And I know on Carolina Ground's website, you can order 4 to 5 different kinds of rye flour, at least last time I checked. So if you're shopping around, hopefully that helps you to figure out what you would like. For pastries, light flour can be the way to go. I choose whole grain rye flour for these brownies because I think it gives them that like intense loftiness and intense flavor. But you know, for something like a pie crust per se, or a biscuit with some rye flour, I would choose the lightest of all, which would be the light rye.
Okay, if adding 10% discard to something more cake-like, do you scale back your baking powder or soda at all?
I don't. For something like this, we're just talking about flavor application. And so, you know, you actually might want to increase those just a tiny bit. If you think about it, right, whatever it is that you're trying to rise, if you go ahead and add that element of starter, that's just another thing that the dough needs to lift. So actually keep your baking powder, keep your baking soda, and potentially increase it just a hair. So you get that same level of loft while adding something potentially heavy to the dough. Yeah. But you can also just start by, you know, tossing it in here, tossing it in there. It's the same thing. I was intimidated through working with rye flours because I knew about wheat and I didn't know about rye. And it just takes a minute of intention. Same thing, tossing sourdough into stuff. I was like, wow, that seems so complicated. You just start doing it and your body will figure it out. That's one thing I love to talk about while teaching is just, we're all looking for that baker's intuition, and that's just data accumulated by the body over time. And generally the hardest thing is just starting off. So I'm excited for you if this is, you know, your foray into rye flour. That's thrilling because it really is so versatile, so flavorful. And again, you know, as we try and answer some big questions and move forward into the future, it's important to have other tools in the toolkit. And we know rye is able to grow in adverse conditions, and we might need that. Okay. So I've got all the sugar, the 3 eggs, and going to whip them up. The instructions say a full 8 minutes. We want glossy, bubbly, creamy looking batter when we're done. I'm not gonna go the full 8 minutes, so you don't have to listen to the mixer the whole time, but I'll go long enough to show you what we're looking for. You got it all the way on high. Stop, take a look. So it will start to what we call ribbon, which is good. We are looking to dissolve the salt into the egg and make it really nice and creamy. So the reason I'm recommending that you whip this for 8 full minutes, no joke, is that it creates sort of a meringue in the dough, and then when you bake it, it's gonna rise to the top and create that crunchy layer, which is what we're looking for. At least that's what I'm looking for. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and call this good. It feels like the majority of my time as a teacher is answering questions about like, do I have to do it this way? So I'm actually saying you don't have to do it for the full 8 minutes. This is gonna be fine. You just want it to be, we can zoom in here, glossy, bubbly, thick, and then you can feel that the sugar has pretty much dissolved in here. That's what we're looking for. And then to further encourage that dissolving of the sugar, which is gonna give us some nice gloss, I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of boiling water from the bottom of the double boiler. So if you're unfamiliar with a double boiler, I didn't go over that earlier, but essentially to melt the chocolate and the butter together, we've got a pot, water, enough water so it's not going to just boil out, right? You burn the bottom of your pot, fill it with water, put your bowl on top, put your chocolate, your butter in there, bring it to a gentle boil. That heat is going to heat the bowl and you whisk it together. It's just a really nice way in particular to prepare chocolate to the right temperature. And we just have a makeshift one. Of course, you can probably buy a special double boiler, but that's all that you need. So glossy, bubbly, thick, feeling the sugar dissolved. I have 2 tablespoons of the boiling water from the bottom of that pot. To further help, I'm gonna have it on low and just slowly drizzle it in. And you'll see it immediately thin out and get shiny. That's what you want. And we'll take it up to high for just a second here. All right. We'll go ahead and leave that on. So here, we have super glossy mixture. I have all of the butter, right? I use the Pluger for this, and I've chosen to use half of the recommended amount of chocolate is the bittersweet, and half is some milk chocolate chips. Again, if those milk chocolate chips are gonna, that extra milk fat is what's gonna help give us a super glossy top. So this is now going to get added to what's in the mixing bowl. Take this off. My mom is a wonderful baker, and I grew up eating these kinds of treats, chocolate chip cookies, brownies, like basically every day. We were told to go outside and play. We came in at 4 o'clock and had a cookie or a brownie. And that's how I became the adult that I am. But I'm so excited to start making stuff like this that's simple, approachable, accessible, comes together in an hour and really kind of combines my personality and my mom's together. Okay, so it's gonna go in, turn it on. You won't see any change for a minute, but it'll start to come together. And just with anything, you want to make sure it's fully incorporated before you move on to the next step. And then high speed. All right, looking perfect. And again, I don't know if you can see, it's got this gorgeous ribbon texture, so that's what we're looking for. Beautiful batter. Okay. All right, now I will add the vanilla, the oil. The salt was already in with the cocoa and the rye flour. I use Ghirardelli Dutch process. The Dutch process is just going to be extra dark. And if you want to, like, I don't know, Halloween, holidays, whatever, you want to do something different, you'd also add just like a tiny bit of charcoal powder and you get a completely black brownie, which is just fun sometimes for contrast, visual differences, you know, experimenting. So I'm going to add the vanilla. Potentially. And the oil. And the starter. And we'll do half of the dry mix, stir it up, and then do more. If you wanted to add something fun into your brownies, dried fruit, nuts, whatever, this is the time that you would add it. So just starting it on slow so it doesn't poof and get all over you. All right, and then before it gets too mixed, I'm gonna add the remaining bit. Nice thing about rye flour is that, you know, I'm not worried about developing any gluten. If this were an all-purpose flour, I wouldn't want to mix it too far because I'd be worried that I potentially have a tougher brownie than I want. And great thing about rye is you're just not worried about that at all because there's no gluten to develop. Easy breezy. workshop, scrape down the sides. We have this gorgeous ultra glossy dough going on here. I haven't been scraping down the sides very much during this class, but you should, if you need to, always scrape down the sides and then get underneath the bottom. So make sure before you take it off the mixer or you pour it into your bowl, you've got some spatula to get underneath the bottom. And just make sure that there's no unincorporated flour under there. Even a small amount of unincorporated flour will make a big difference in the consistency of your dough, whether it's a brownie or bread. Just a spin to get it incorporated. Okay, we're good. So here is the brownie batter. And I'm excited. I'm gonna take this and I've started making a little bit of ice cream at home. And I'm excited to actually put this on a sheet pan really thin and make some ice cream bars, like the outside for an ice cream sandwich. So gorgeous, thick, and glossy. I don't know what else we could be looking for. I'm gonna pour it into the pan. I'm gonna toss it in the oven. It's so dark in there, it's hard to tell, but you'll see as it comes out. It smells so incredible. And I think you can just already tell how luscious this is. All right, we're gonna even it out. I'm baking in the cast iron. You know, if you should have something like the skillet on hand, will give you a really nice crispy outer coating to your brownie. Okay. Brownie batter is in, and we're gonna load it into the oven. Me, Shane's here. So. Again, it's 350 middle rack, probably half an hour. That's what we're looking at. And let's get started on the buttercream. Okay, so I have to switch out mixers. We're gonna take 2 minutes here, hum a little theme song in your head, and I'll be right back for the buttercream.
While you're assembling that together, there's a question.
Great.
I wanted to see the parchment sling. How do you make this? But I like the cast iron pan as well.
Okay, great. I'll show you the parchment sling real quick with a bread pan. Shane, can I ask you to unplug that mixer and plug this one in? I was a theater kid in high school, big surprise. And I always feel like everything should go black and we should have our black turtlenecks on during these scene changes. All right, well, we get the other mixer hooked up. So parchment sling, let me grab the parchment. Ta-da! So when you make a parchment sling, you can do this for cornbread, banana bread, whatever. I don't know why I said cornbread. You never want to make a parchment sling for cornbread. You want it to go onto like a very hot skillet of bacon grease. I don't know what came over me, but let's say we're making banana bread or brownies. You're gonna have, this is the stand-in for your 8x8 pan, same idea. You wanna fold, this is a half sheet of parchment. And I recommend getting parchment paper from some kind of professional source. Don't bother getting parchment paper, foil, or plastic wrap. If you use it from the grocery store, just go ahead and order it from Webstaurant. This is going to be easier to wrangle than something that's been on a roll. So you want to fold it and make sure it's going to meet the edges. So I have a little bit here and a little bit there. I'm not too worried about it. You get the idea. You just want it to fit your container. And then you'll start by creasing it on one side. You just want to make sure that it's nice and creased so that you get a good edge. I'm just using my hand to run it over any place where it's meeting a corner, and then I'll take it out and make a more extreme crease. So I saw that there's one here, crease, one here, crease. Doing some origami here, and then a crease. So, you know, could be a little bit more balanced, but this is what we have. And then you're gonna make sure it just fits nicely. You can, of course, right? Take a minute, trim up your work, do what you need to do. And then you've got your parchment sling. So this works for something, you know, in a pan like this, or in something shallow like your 8x8 pan. I do this for cakes as well. So this is essentially what you want. And then the nice thing about it is you can just easily lift up whatever you've baked and then put it on your wire cooling rack. That is one thing I didn't mention earlier. If I do make brownies in a pan, I will take them from, use the tabs of the parchment sling, lift it up, and then let them cool on the wire rack. Obviously, I just let them cool in the skillet overnight. And so hopefully that was helpful. Okay, we just need to grab the attachment for this guy. Buttercream, essentially it's just the American version, nothing boiled, no meringue action going on here, very simple. Butter, powdered sugar, the addition of tahini, maybe a little salt if you want that to kick it up, and then some vanilla. So if you love peanut butter, you love almond butter, you have something else that you want to put in here, doesn't have to be the tahini. Again, tahini, if you're unfamiliar, it's made with sesame seeds. I think it pairs so well with the rye flavor and the intensity of the chocolate. It just kind of picks it up, and I'm not one who loves just straight buttercream with vanilla. The frequency is a little too high for me, so it just brings it right down. All right, room temp butter. And I'm gonna add half of the powdered sugar here. You want a little milk, heavy cream, or half and half. So part of the joy of buttercream is just all this little adjusting that you'll do to get it to the right consistency. And I'll see if I can just turn it so you get a little bit better view. And again, start slow. I'm just going to keep adding to it. Oh, and of course the tahini will help this. So my bad. You want to add the tahini and the butter first. This is already weighed out, but it's a significant amount. It's 121 grams potentially. It's enough of a flavor that you definitely notice it. And just makes it exciting. Okay. So again, we'll start slow. And just let it get nice and creamy. Looks good. No lumps, that's nice. I like to run a fork or a whisk through my powdered sugar before I start, just to get rid of any potential lumps. So we've got the butter, the tahini, look at that, that's gorgeous. Mixed together, and we are going to add to this a little bit of vanilla. And you can use heavy cream, whole milk, half and half, whatever you have on hand to adjust the consistency of your buttercream. So I have a piping bag. I'm going to show you how I like to pipe my brownies. And you're just going to kind of add and subtract a little bit of dairy and powdered sugar to get the right consistency. So do what the recipe calls for first, always. Sage advice. Try the recipe first, folks. And then if you need to adjust, which sometimes you do, you're either going to add a little bit of powdered sugar or add a little bit of milk to get it nice and spreadable. Take a look, and then I just use my finger to figure out if it's what I call swoopable. So this is pretty stiff, this is nice. And yeah, I can put my finger through it. It's holding kind of the imprint of my finger. And I think I could swoop this pretty easily. It's warm as well. And so I don't think I actually need to add the 1 to 2 tablespoons of dairy that is called for. We're gonna get the bottom and sides of this bowl together, and then I'll show you my favorite way to pipe. Scrape down. Just wanna get everything. Oh, smells so good. All right. The aromas of this dough and the buttercream is really, really good. Get everything off. So many different ways you can handle your buttercream. I'm gonna put it into a piping bag because I love this look that I'm gonna show you here. Excuse this, guys. Okay, so I have one already cut up. This bag here, and essentially you're going to take your piping bag. Let's see if we can get a little closer. Cool. And you want to cut the end. Just doing this one as a demo. All right, so you have a straight end. Then you're going to take the scissors. What are these called? And just put a 1/2 inch cut at the top. And then when you put the buttercream in and you start to pipe, you want that top slit to be what you're looking down at. And you're going to get this really elegant swirl. So I'll go ahead and top these. I did the same with this. And the larger you make your incision here, the bigger your wave will be. You'll see what I mean here. Just checking on these brownies. They're still in there. Okay. They have not wandered away. This is the buttercream from yesterday, so you can make it ahead of time, no problem. Just put this in the fridge, and then you want to bring it to room temperature before you use it. We're going to go ahead and use this because it's nice and luscious. Well, that doesn't feel too bad either, but we'll go ahead and use this. Come on back. Pull down the sides. If you don't have a piping bag, you can absolutely do this with a Ziploc bag. You can also just glob it on and swoop it. This just makes it feel extra fancy. Then, so you've got your top now, and then I'll start sort of squeezing here. Roll it. And this is also how I get the ice cream inside my ice cream sandwiches is in a piping bag. All right, we're good to go. And then if you want to try it, you know, just on a random surface first to get your jitters out. You just start. Well, it's not adhering to the bowl, but you get the idea. All right, I'm gonna make this slit just a little bit bigger. Okay. And then we'll do some brownies. So I just love the little, my friend ices her cakes like this in New Orleans and she calls it the squiggle. And I just think it's super fun. But we'll do a couple different kinds of frostings. You just want to keep it down and keep it moving. You can make all kinds of different shapes. And then of course, classic. Do some swooping. And the hilarious thing about this striving for this paper thin glossy top is that a lot of times you're just going to go over it. So, you know, no crying over brownies, as I have learned. But make sure you get that picture first so everybody knows you can, in fact, get that glossy top. So I'm just using this and going in this kind of motion. Great. We'll leave these guys open and then at the very top, and do some sprinkles. These are sesame seeds. You can toast these on your stovetop with a little bit of honey. And that's also what I recommend. And there you go. Rye brownies, tahini buttercream. That's what I know, y'all. And we'll check on these guys, see how they're coming. So looking good, obviously not done. I'm gonna stop like spilling it towards you. But yeah, they definitely need more time getting nice and glossy. Smells delicious. So your brownies are done. They are sort of going to bloom in the oven. If you see a couple cracks, that's okay. It's gonna add to that gorgeous kind of rustic aesthetic on the top. But they'll bloom a little bit, they'll crack a little bit, and then it's actually gonna reside. And then that's generally when they're done. So those are the things I watch for regardless of time. Again, it's 350, generally 30 to 35 minutes. And then when you stick a knife in the middle, toothpick, whatever, coffee stick stir, it comes out clean, you're good. I know there's a big debate about fudgy versus chewy. You can underbake these just a hair if you want that fudgier kind of moisture consistency. You can bake them a little bit longer to get them cakey. Another way to sort of get fudgier or cakier brownies, you can add a little bit more flour. If you'd like something cakier, you can also use a smaller pan if you want something fudgier. So I think these brownies are so good that we don't even need to talk about those categories. And you know, when you take a bite of it, you close your eyes, you enjoy it. That's all you really need to know. But they do ride the line, in my opinion, of cakey and fudgy. So hopefully they'll do you right. Does anybody have any questions? I know we are well before noon, but it's just a quick Tuesday morning hangout so that you can make these maybe this weekend, maybe today, maybe you're making them right now. But they are delicious, and I wish you gooey, chewy, crispy, paper thin, glossy brownie success with rye flour. So yeah, I'm looking over here because this is where I can see your faces. Does anybody have any questions? Hi. And yeah, try the squiggle. That's really just a fun, different thing that I found. You will get a recording of this workshop when it's over. And I hope you'll check out some of my other workshops. If this was just an interesting point for you to talk about rye flour, I have a number of rye bread workshops, both in person now, yay, and also on the website where you signed up for this. And I will post some pictures of this on Instagram. My name's Baker Hands over there. If you are on Instagram and want to give me a follow. And I think that's what we've got. I'll post a picture later of these brownies coming out of the oven. And looks like we've got a question here.
I probably missed this, but why did you change the mixers? Are they two different sizes?
Oh, I just changed the mixer so you didn't have to wait for me to wash the mixing bowl. They are two different sizes. Just like a hilarious small backstory, I wrote my whole first book, A Baker's Year, which you can get wherever books are sold. Great pie dough recipe in there. I wrote that whole first book, all the cakes, everything in there. I just had a wooden bowl and a wooden mixing spoon. And I thought, oh, it'd be so great to get a KitchenAid mixer. So when I got married, I put one on my registry. I ordered the wrong size. So the red one is a mini, and I actually use that more than the other one. So then I got a larger one, and you know, I lament my wooden spoon and wooden bowl, but that's okay. All things change, all things grow. And so I actually do recommend for size purposes, and it's super powerful. You can do bagel dough and anything. If you have a small kitchen, the mini artisan will do you right. But essentially, I just didn't want you to have to wait while I did dishes. That's what we'll do after this. We're gonna turn up the music, do the dishes, show us have some good music then. But that's the essential difference between those two.
Okay, yeah. There's a question recommendation for ice cream sandwiches, like as far as ice cream flavor.
Yeah, so I am, after class, I'm gonna make mint. I'm gonna do mint with like shaved chocolate into it. And I only use one ice cream recipe. I'm not like a huge ice cream person. If you're interested in following somebody who does really fun stuff with ice cream, my friend Marcy Tobbs is in Maine, and she's got Tall Tree Snack Shop on Instagram. She's like ice cream cookie queen. And I just use Jenny Britton Bauer's ice cream base from Food 52, easy breezy. You can just Google it. And it's nice because there's no eggs required. And I just have a small like home tabletop Cuisinart ice cream maker. Takes about 45 minutes. And so the thing with the ice cream sandwiches, I'm going to spread the brownie batter out really thin. And I thought mint chip would go really well with this rye brownie. So bake the rye brownie super thin, then I can cut it up into bars. Have, you know, make everything like the day before you want to actually make the thing. That's like a just general philosophy about baking. it's a lot about prep. So make the ice cream the day before, make the brownies the day before, get everything in the freezer, and then you can just like have your jams on and be assembling stuff. And that's the super fun part to me. So I'm doing mint chip. It's the short version answer. Mint chip.
What size pan for ice cream sandwiches?
Cherry would also go very well. I'm going to use this. So you guys, I'm terrible. It's actually one of the things that terrifies me. I don't know. It's a half sheet pan size. If anybody knows what that actually is, you can type it into the chat. But half sheet pan. I can measure it. 12 by 16 is what we got here. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I was making ice cream cookie sandwiches with these giant cookies. So fun, right? But then it was like kind of hard to eat. And that's one of my pet peeves in the food world, when something is like exciting or interesting, but you like can't figure out how to get your mouth around it. And so I thought that a thin layer of brownie with the ice cream between it would replicate a little bit more, obviously, those ice cream bars that we all have had at one point or another, but just with a little bit more integrity. All right, it's getting warm in here. We got any more questions?
Got a couple comments.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's so much fun. It's the first time I've baked along with you. The kitchen smells delicious. Your setup and organization was great. Looking forward to playing with Rye Flour.
Thank you. Yeah, this is great for those of you who have been following along for a while. I moved to this area about 2.5 years ago and have been sort of searching for a landing pad, and so we found it, and we're here in our virtual baking studio. We're calling it Sour Flour Studios. We're in downtown Whitesburg, Kentucky, which is an awesome little town. And you can come here and, of course, take more virtual classes. So easy. You're at your house. I'm here. It's good. Nice and affordable. But we are taking people in the studio now. We're so excited to be vaccinated and be interacting with people a little bit more. My dad jokes just tend to get delivered better in person. So if you want to come and hang out with me and bake, I do sourdough summer camps, and I do weekend-long baking classes, and you can book the studio, come with some friends, let's hang out, let's bake. We can definitely have loud music on when we do it, which is really fun. And yeah, thank you so much. I think that's all we got.